Manish, welcome to the Future Work podcast of Allwork.Space. I'll say you and I were chatting a little bit beforehand. I have the benefit of knowing your background and you a little bit of mine, things that we share. Um, how about if I introduce you to our audience at large so that they also have an appreciation for the comments that you'll be making? Manish Sharma is the Group Chief Executive Officer for Accenture Operations. In his role, he oversees Accenture's comprehensive portfolio of operations services across business functions such as finance, procurement, supply chain, marketing, and sales, as well as industry specific services such as banking, insurance, health services. He leads a team of over 145,000 professionals charged with developing, selling, and delivering intelligent operations to drive transformational value and productivity for their clients. Manish is also a member of Accenture's Global Management Committee. That's a heavy load. You've been a very busy person for a lot of years with Accenture. So we're really grateful to you for being able to join us today, Manish.
Thank you, Frank. Thanks for having me with you. It's always fun, and you just made me feel very comfortable with some of
Oh,
your
well,
kind words.
that's my whole purpose in life is to make people feel comfortable. So I'll start off by working with our audience a little bit, and hopefully getting them comfortable with some important information we can share with them. You have seen an awful lot in your career, in your tenure and over the last 36 months. How would you compare that with the past 20 years?
So I think, first of all, Frank, I would like to say that it has been a fun journey. I know this is 27 years for me now, and it has been fun journey. Really had all kinds of experiences. While you say experiences, I say a lot of blue and black marks because of all the experiences that you were in the same industry, so you kind of know this. But I would say that the navigating the challenges of the pandemic has really expanded our capacity for change.
Yes.
What was once expected to take place slowly, right, over a number of years, now is compressed into shorter time frames. The composition of workforces some significantly altered, right, has resulted in some shifts becoming permanent as a result of hybrid and remote work. And I'll give you some data points, right? Accenture's, we did a research, right? And we found that before the pandemic, executives across the C suite estimated 19% of their workforce on average was permanently working in a remote fashion. Now that figure actually sits much more closer to one third of the workforce. That is one. The second one I will say is this has opened a new era which none of us have seen of compressed transformation. Supply chains have been restructured, work that we assumed required being in office has been reimagined. Productivity, as we know, now thrives virtually. I never thought about that, right? Now we are doing everything in a virtual world. But also, the last point I'll make here is this crisis has also exposed what's the art of possible. The organizational response to the crisis showed that every systems and processes that is historically, they proved hard to move, were transformed or accelerated. And we are now at an inflection point where sustaining growth will be defined by those who create value faster and maximize the impact of these investments, Frank. So that's kind of my summary. Super compressed transformation is the way to go.
Well, you only made about 15 very important points there. So I want to thank you for that because I think that you're right that acceleration, um, it's sort of like you don't know how fast you can run until you start running. And most of the companies in the world, and particularly government, was just walking slowly, enjoying the view. And all of a sudden, we started running. And we found out how fast we can go. In fact, I don't think we have found how fast we can go yet. I think we're just learning that. I think we're just on the beginning of that. overall. So I think that that's an important point. We deal with a lot of large global Fortune 500, even 150 companies overall, and have for decades. And one of the things that we kind of joke about a little bit is this quick story about the CEO and the CFO in the middle of the pandemic walking through the corporate headquarters together. And they're walking down the aisle of empty desks and empty offices. And the CEO says, "Wow, it's all empty." And the CFO looks at him, and you've been there, and says, "Yeah, but the company's doing great." And then the CFO, they both start laughing. He says, "We don't need all this stuff anymore." And we realized, and take this interaction, you and I have never met before. And yet we're absolutely comfortable meeting virtually. And I know if we did meet in person, we would have a warm greeting. We would instantly be able to do anything we needed. And there wouldn't be any of the typical sizing up that executives do sometimes the first time they meet in person. Oh, yeah? Oh, how tall are you? Oh, well, nothing matters anymore. And I think that's the beauty of what we've learned and what you have been accomplishing at Accenture. You mentioned uh, remote work, and you mentioned hybrid offices. These are terms that are bandied about by everybody these days, but very few people can put a good definition to them. So why don't we try right now? You take the lead on it. What's your definition of remote work? And what's your definition of a hybrid office?
So let me kind of put it like, I think at Accenture, right, flexible and hybrid workforces don't just relate to location. That's point number one, right? We truly believe that skills are an important part of any hybrid workforce. So, what this enables is for employees to be truly flexible and work in environments most conducive to their needs while building their skill sets for more opportunities in the future. Right? And I think in this, the leaders really need to ask their employees what they are most comfortable with in flexible work models while prioritizing the continuous learning and the new skills development, Frank, because it is so important that we ask what works for them. I think what should be the organizations be addressing? I think organizations must also address how the blend of humans and technology has dramatically changed certain roles and will continue to do so in the future. And we are already seeing this happening, because I want to bring it to life with some examples which are commonly related. There is retail associates once serving clients in a brick and mortar stores are now straddling online and offline responsibilities, as the store is now a hub for curbside pickup. Responsibilities have changed, required skills have evolved, and business leaders must think about the implications of this new role. We are also working with a telecom leader, right, on a role based model. Functions of each job dictates if they are on site, at home, or hybrid, with the ability to flex and adapt at as the situations change, Frank. So, my thing will be, it is very flexible. When you talk about hybrid workforce, flexible workforce, and it is not related to location. Breaking the linkage from location will be, I think, the way forward on this, Frank.
Well, in the past, and this gets into great resignation issues as well, but in the past, all these decisions and definitions um, were from the top down. And today, I think an awful lot of what's happening in remote work and in how we look at all of our job functions is really being driven from the bottom up. And it's a recognition by managers and an empowerment by managers, of course. But I think that the people, if you will, if you can use that term, from the bottom up of every organization are saying, here's how I can be most productive. And they're creating these new models, I think, even more than management is.
Completely agree. Completely agree with that. It is an empowered, I would say, organization, empowered folks deciding what works best for them. And I think the point I'll reiterate, Frank, on this is that continuous learning and skill development has to be an integral part of whatever we do. If you lose that and it is just the current work that people are doing, there will be a fatigue which will set in, right? And that is why this important of hybrid workforce, flexible workforce, but continuous development, continuous learning has got to be a theme as we go into the future of work.
How do you think that hybrid work, certainly it changes the physical space where people work and how they work overall. How do you see, um, I guess I'll say, in the past, all corporations seem to have built monuments to themselves in the form of giant edifices with their names on it, where people congregated and strove to move up the elevator to the executive suite. How do you see that model working in the future? Or do you think that's even important anymore?
So I think the big artifices that you are mentioning probably, they will have to be relooked at. I personally believe that all the monuments and everything else, they will become innovation centers. They will become incubation centers where people will come together to ideate about new things. They will become where learning is important. So rather than offices, I think all of this, what you're going to see is conversion of offices into innovation centers, incubation centers, reskilling centers, rather than people sitting in their offices and trying to do something. What are you going to do in those monuments is important. And I think that is where I think it is about incubation, innovation, which will actually force the pace of this monuments, Frank.
No, I couldn't agree more. I think the purpose of bringing people together is not to work, but it is to create. And the way offices and the way buildings and the way HR departments will have to work in the future is going to deal with that. But using HR as an example, HR departments have been slow to come up with any sort of good group-wide or system-wide, enterprise-wide technology to help manage this structure. And I would position, I would say, if I were at that they already have one, they just aren't using it well. We are None of us are occupiers anymore. I I'm going to assume that you're in your residence today. I'm in my residence today. We are not office occupiers, and I'll use you and I as good examples. We are travelers. Everybody is a traveler today, whether it's global, regional, local, um, uh, within their own city. We office in three or four or five different facility types and doing different types of work and functions. So I would say that the travel management systems that companies are used to using are really the ideal systems with some modification to use by the HR departments to manage all of the flexibility needed in remote work. And yet nobody's doing that. They're all trying to reinvent something. And yet they have something that manages this process, manages all the contracts, all the people, all the expense management. They're already used to that. What's your thought of that migration?
So I would say that, organizations that create strong relationships, Frank, between technology and people, right, and enabled by new skills and ways of working, are better positioned for future growth. And I will repeat, strong relationship between technology and people enabled by new skills and ways of working. Now, practically speaking, the longevity of skills is different than it once was. Yesterday, the lifespan of a skill was 15 to 20 years.
Yeah.
Today, in a digital world, skills last only for 3 to 5 years at max.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
And the future ready organizations, they recognize this by creating a culture of continuous learning, both to help their employees and also, right, to kind of not just to keep them in their new roles, but keeping pace as the work evolves, right? And they must also ensure that they improve their skills equitably. Some employees, particularly those who are focused on transactional tasks, will need to be differently skilled to either succeed in their workforce or in the community at large. I think some data points, right? Two-thirds, 70% roughly of workers, they agree a culture of continuous learning, whether it is training, skills, education, helps them meet their potential. And I think one example, right, is our future skills pilot that we are doing with Unilever and Walmart, that builds reskilling and redeployment pathways to ensure workers are productive and employable as we are looking at the labor market transforming around them, right? The program, in collaboration with the World Economic Forum, right, is rooted in the idea that no one company can fully manage the scope of workforce transformation in today's post-digital era. I think in addition, I think we are seeing changes to the ways of working is a significant expansion to the current hiring pool, right? With remote working, some of the potential employees are open to opportunities that they may never have considered in the past. They would have never done that, Frank, right? The new talent is available from any part of the country, even the world in some respects. And the HR departments will need to find a balance between hiring current available talent and building its own to develop a very strong hybrid workforce culture to really support transformation, Frank.
Well, it's interesting. I completely agree with you, by the way, that and recognize that skills learning in the past used to be very job specific, and now skills is very individualistic. The way that we need to learn, and we need to learn things beyond our pure job skills. A lot of interaction going on, but also today, borders don't matter as much. We can hire anyone, anywhere, anytime that has the skill in the world. And the beauty of that is not only to the company, but it's less disruptive to the individual. We have people scattered all over the world as you do, and we don't tell someone, oh, in order for you to do this job, you need to move to New York City, uproot your family, do this, do that, and we have to have all these expenses. Only we just say, oh, what time zone are you in? Okay, well, here's the 4 other time zones you're going to work in, and that's it. And then we're all connected, and we all work on the same system. You guys do a lot of the same thing, I know, and this is one of the beauties of the technologies that we're able to use today, but it's also part of the mindset culturally. You don't have to look at somebody or be sitting next to them or have them in the corporate headquarters to have meaningful, productive environment for them to work. I think that's a critical change that all of us are getting used to, and some of us are leading at overall. I think as you look into the future of work, what do you think 2025, 2030 is going to look like? We have big conference going on in Glasgow with a lot of 2030, 2050 different dates out that are telling us all the changes that the politicians of the world think we should be making for our own good. They believe. How do you think the future of work will look in those same time periods, considering some of those changes?
So I think you know I spent a lot of time kind of thinking as to how it will look like. So a great question, Frank. Right now, we all know that technology shines the brightest when it is augmenting or elevating human ability. And I think as this happens, the future ready organizations will see that talent blueprint expand and shift into equal parts. And when I say equal parts, one third, one third, one third. And I think it is going to be the specialist, deep expertise, right? 33%. Having robotic solutions for about 33%, and transactional work still being about 33%. In other words, businesses will typically need more people, not less, but the type of work being done will change. The goal should be to equip existing people with the skills they need to move into the future. We are already seeing new roles emerging as digital transformation is accelerated, and we anticipate these roles not only becoming more common, but becoming even more nuanced as they evolve in the future. I'll give you some examples, right? We have seen a growing demand from business advisors who can find ways to optimize inventory and working capital. We are seeing a huge demand for data scientists who analyze data and find new ways to extract value. Tech engineers, AI, cloud, security, who continue to scale and advance the maturity of capabilities. For example, this diverse team working together will create an algorithm to predict which vendor will pay and when. So the future of work from current wherever you are, I think it looks between a mix, and I think probably a very equal mix of specialist robotic solutions and transactional talent trying to deliver immense and very differentiated value and experience, in the coming world, Frank.
Well, we see a lot of change. It's funny that you should mentioned as it relates to people, equal thirds. We have a equal thirds formula as well. We say that um, everything to do with remote work is a combination of people, place, and technology, and that the only thing that ever changes is the ratios that you use those things in. And so we liken it to making bread, flour, water, and salt. Okay, you can make 1,000, 10,000 types of bread with only two or three or four ingredients. And so we look at our industry and we look at what future of work issues as being very simple, just adjusting of the ratios and the timing that we apply those things. Um, so I think that you and I would be very much aligned in where things are going. But I'm curious, how do you see the physical side of this? We've talked a lot about the people side. And we've talked a lot about um, what's important to the individuals, to the group, to the enterprise, people wise. We've talked a bit about technology as a driver for change and all of that. But we haven't talked a lot about the place and maybe how those things will come together. Changes in facilities, aside from the initial discussion about innovation centers, a place being an innovation center. We think that we'll be dealing in a virtual reality environment. In fact, I've been working with a headset, an Oculus headset on and off for last month with a group over in Germany, and we meet and we do all of our business in a virtual environment that's very, very interesting. It looks like we're in a total game world, and a good one at that. It's not really terrible avatars. It's some pretty good stuff. I think that we're going to be changing the way we work to where you and I would be in the same room virtually. You and I would be, whether it's holographically or whether it's using avatar structures, and we would be much more immersive in the technology that would create place as opposed to going to place. What's your thoughts on that?
No, I completely agree with you, Frank. I think the when you talk about the physical sites and everything else, I think we will have the virtual reality absolutely coming into the play. Even look at it from an employee life cycle, right? Whether it is reaching out to the candidates, having your first initial discussions and the interviews, how we onboard them, how we train them, how we get them on the job training, how do we ensure that the work gets delivered, all this life cycle, the experiences will change, and you'll see a lot more what was being done in a physical way being done remotely. And we are already leading the way, even within Accenture, right? Means the way we are kind of defining some of this stuff around the employee life cycle, or the experiences, or the customer, how we onboard. Recently, we onboarded. We were having some, a massive exercise of, taking over some of the centers and some people in different locations. We did virtual onboarding of 7,000 people,
Oh yeah.
welcoming, onboarding, and everything through technology, through the virtual stuff, and all the different stacks of technology being deployed. And it was a flawless experience, from a employee perspective. And employee experience is important as we go in this journey, Frank.
No, I think it's actually what the critical driver. Again, I think everything is driven needs wise from the bottom up, and that our only job as leading enterprises, if you will, is to provide resources and services to that group. That's our job, is to make sure they're smart. They're smarter than we are generally. Uh, all we have to do is make sure they have all the tools and create it right. And I think that's where a lot of companies fail. They don't give their teams the creative right to individually make decisions in the past. And I think that's one of the explosive changes that we've seen in the pandemic period, is that individuals now make decisions, not necessarily committees. I have to do this. I have to do this right now. I'm working remotely. There's nobody else to talk to. Here's what I'm going to do. And what that does in companies, in my view, accelerates everything. Every time you have to ask someone to make a decision, you slow it down. Every time you make your own decision, you speed it up. And I think that's something that we're learning right now in this period, and we will carry forward into the future overall.
Miss, I would say, if I were to kind of summarize what you just mentioned, right, is a fact that I think employees become more empowered. Employees probably have much more, I would say, bigger picture around a process view rather than a task view. Earlier, they were given tasks to accomplish and tasks to be completed. Now they're looking at a process, and they are able to control the different variables of the process, and they're trying to take charge of that. So I think it is a lot of goodness in some of the stuff around this, with a view where probably they feel much more empowered, they feel much more accomplished, they feel much more accountable for the process rather than the task that were being thrown at them earlier.
I think it makes it more fun too.
Yeah.
I mean, from a practical point of view, being empowered is important, and making your decisions is important. Feeling that you have a purpose is important. But if it's not fun, forget it.
Exactly.
Who wants to do that? Who wants that job? I don't. And so I think that this is something that we all have to be watching for, is to keep the joy in work, not just the changes and driving and striving, but we all have to find a certain level of joy in what we do.
I think I'll give a comment on that one, right? We started on this big journey, right, around automation and some of the other stuff, and it got accelerated during the pandemic. But our philosophy is, right, remove anything or remove or eliminate anything that is measurable, repeatable, predictable, or transactional in nature should not be done by human beings. They should only do interesting work which robots cannot do, right? And that is one of the big shifts, to Frank, to your point around changing the orientation towards fun, joy, interesting work. And I think that is kind of taking place as we speak.
Well, it's I don't know if this makes the point or not that you're working for, but we're working with a company, and they do a lot of machining work, a lot of milling and machining work, and they're replacing the machine operators on the floor with some robotic machining structures. And what they came to us for was to set up virtual offices for the people that were running the CNC software to make the robots work. And those people could be anywhere in the world. They had the talent, and those people had a much better skill set and a much better compensation structure overall. And most of the people that they were choosing, though, initially, was, to your other point, were people that were being retrained to run the CNC software to manage the robot rather than stand there all day long feeding the metal through the lathe. So their upskilling was very strong, and they were able to do it remotely, and they were able to get rid of some of the tedium of the work and the physical aspect of the work, and they were able to do it from multiple locations 24/7 instead of 8-hour shifts. So this is to your point, more jobs, upskilling, higher quality work environment, better compensation, robotically managed, all of those things coming together in that one example. So I think that is a driver. The other thing you mentioned, and I think that's critical, is that we have a mantra around data. It's get the data. Data becomes information, which transforms to knowledge, which allows action. So get the data. So if we are all data driven, to your point of things that are duplicable, replicable, that can be process driven, if we are all very focused on data as a format, as a process to drive many of these things, and every individual within the chain of effort, I think of it as effort as opposed to work, then everybody's involved in that data and contributes to it. You really can accelerate the process overall.
No, so I think, again, cannot agree more with you, right? I think data is the competitive edge advantage that we the organizations should really lean on, right? The importance of having actionable data at your fingertips cannot be overstated, and real time data supporting decisions is the only way for data to translate into employee productivity, for better business outcomes. So that is completely aligned on that front.
Yeah, no, I really think we're there. How do you think, and it's sort of, we're running out of time here, but as we address a last question, how do you think enterprises should address and prepare themselves for the future of work, and what changes and how they deal with people should they be considering to not get left behind?
So I think we truly feel that we are already at the beginning of our future workforce. Right? One we anticipated would take place over years, but now it is unfolding very quickly. Right? I think where the workforce of the future is being decided right now is different across industries. But as more hybrid work benefits are realized across them, whether through improving the bottom line or enriching the work culture, this trend is permanent. That is one. Now, what are the things that they should be doing, right? I always have my famous five on this, right? First, think big, and be willing to go beyond incremental change. Leaders must aim high, right? Then map out the future skills, processes, and technology they need to close the gap. So that is one. Think big. Second, put cloud at the core. Knowledge workers can only succeed if they have seamless flow of information to work with. Leaders who are cloud first are able to explore new areas to scale and maximize value. So that is two. Third one, right? And we discussed, make data a competitive advantage. So I will not belabor this point because we discussed about it. But data has to be at the center of everything you do. Fourth, automate to augment. And I think I mentioned it. It's very important when looking at the bigger picture to scale automation, AI, and integrated solutions with leading practices. Just don't do it for the sake of productivity. It is around quality, consistency, customer experience, employee experience, right? Today, only 20% of what can be automated actually is. Meaning we are missing an important opportunity to drive new sources of value. Finally, create an agile workforce and all the complementary ecosystem relationships to enable your organization to flex and adapt to demand changes and market disruption. So those are my the five things, Frank, as we go into this journey of future.
Well, that's a pretty darn good list, but I'll ask one final question that relates to that. A lot of what you've said, a lot of what we discussed about really relate to larger enterprises. Yet business is of all sizes, and we know that a massive amount of every economy comes from small companies, mom and pop shops, as we call them. Do you think that the changes that we're talking about apply equally or maybe even more to the smaller organizations, and that the smaller organizations who are able to move faster in with change will be the leaders into the future of work? Or do you think it will be a top-down structure where the larger enterprises make the investment that defines how things can be done, creates technologies with a trickle-down theory that will help the smaller companies?
So, great question. Something very close to my heart, right? About the topic. And I will say why I say this. Smaller businesses, when we talked about all the accelerated compressed transformation, right? That is for the big businesses. Smaller businesses' ability to change is much, much bigger than the big corporations. There they have got silos, functions, consensus building, and everything else, right? Whereas when we are talking about small businesses, that's, I think, the compressed transformation becomes super compressed transformation for them. And I think they should not wait for the big companies to change. They should actually lead the way, because for them it is much more easier to really make a difference and see the tangible outcomes in months, in days. Whereas, the big corporations might take some time to kind of get themselves organized, structured, and everything else. So I think that this ability to disrupt in small businesses is even much more, Frank, in the smaller businesses. All the things that I mentioned probably are more applicable to the smaller businesses, right? Because the bigger businesses will take time to kind of to really plan out the super compressed transformation.
Well, no, I think you're right. I was chatting with strategic, the head of strategic planning for a major global 50 company the other day, who just happens to be an old friend from years ago, and he was indicating that it would take them 5 years to make this migration. Um, and I was saying, gosh, we made this migration between January of 2020 and February of 2020. What's wrong with you? And it's a turning a big ship takes time. If you're in a speedboat, you can do a lot of things, but if you're on a tanker, it does take a lot of time. So we're going to see, I think, a lot of the innovation. Again, I'm going to go from back to my bottom up theory. I think the innovation that large companies will see, and that large consulting groups and that drive many of the decisions in large companies will be discovered at the bottom of the food chain, so to speak, size wise, and that those things, those discoveries will migrate upward as opposed to the trickle down theory that we generally see in critical mass manufacturing and things of that nature.
Oh,
So,
I completely aligned, Frank. And actually, I'll tell you about this conversation. Some of the examples that you have used, I think they really corroborated with the way we are thinking. So it's somewhere it all got tied in. So great
well, then
example.
hop on a plane and come on over for dinner.
We'll do that next time.
We're ready. We're ready. Well, we're running out of time. Manish, I'm really sorry to have to end this conversation. But if people should want to know more about what you do at Accenture or what Accenture is doing that might be beneficial to them, how should they reach out, and where can they go to find this information and to reach out to your team or to the correct team inside of Accenture?
Yeah, so I think we have a great a place to go with is our website with very interactive, highly educative. In fact, it is fun to go through the stuff and what we are doing, how we do, and a lot is explained in that. So I will certainly encourage folks to go to Accenture.com and I think kind of look at it. It is this thing and reach out to me, my team anytime, right? Very available to discuss, to brainstorm, to ideate, to innovate, to deliver in whatever form we, people, folks need help. So absolutely available, Frank.
Well, that's great. We've got all the contact information on your team. So if anybody needs to reach out, they can go through Accenture, or they can also reach out through the Future Work podcast, and we can make sure and connect you guys together. So, Manish, it's been wonderful chatting with you. I hope to meet you soon. The dinner invitation is always open. And if we can't meet in Chicago or Newport Beach, maybe we can meet in Mumbai.
I will do that.
That would be a delight as well.
Enjoy the discussion. Thank you.
We'll look forward to it. Thank you so much. Take care.